I said, we have a wonderful speaker today, and I must say this as a qualifier. He's also a personal friend. His name is Marc Brandson, and he's a curator for animal care at the Assiniboine Park Zoo located here in Winnipeg. He's got about 13 plus years experience in this field. Well, I shouldn't say in this field, 20 plus years in this field, but 13 plus years with the zoo. He's been in charge of aquatic operations, animal care. He's been an aquarist from polar bear keeper. He's been in charge of African black-footed penguin keeper. He's done a lot of things. I think you're gonna find this presentation very detailed, but very entertaining. I think anyone that's never really had a chance to know what goes on behind the scenes will be pretty excited about how responsible and how wonderful it's good to have something like this here in Winnipeg. So with no further ado, I'll turn it over to Marc Brandson with also, from time to time, I'll interrupt at maybe 10, 15-minute marks, and you guys can ask questions and ladies can ask questions if you choose to. So with that, Marc, it belongs to you.
Okay, hello everybody. Thank you for coming out. Nice to see you all here. I'm going to share my screen in a second. As Rod said, I'm a curator of animal care here at Assiniboine Park Zoo. I have a little bit of a slideshow presentation. I'm just going to share my screen right now, and bear with me. So today I'm here to talk about the role of accredited zoos here, our core values by which we provide the highest standards of care while working to conserve wild species, educate and inspire the community to help protect wildlife. So a little bit about myself. There's me in a picture inside of a sand filter. So that more action shot while doing, I think I'm doing a order for carbon because we needed more. But that at the time would have been right when we had stingrays here at the zoo. So as I mentioned, I'm a curator here at the zoo. I'm also the firearms coordinator, a dive safety officer, and the chief fire warden. So anything fire safety related. I started here in 2009 as a zookeeper, and I worked with the polar bears. I was the lead polar bear keeper during the inaugural year of Journey to Churchill. And I oversee the animal collection, breeding programs, dive and life support programs, and day-to-day operations here at the zoo. So at the zoo, we have a number of mandates, and this is what we do, or what we definitely feel excited about, what we offer. And so we maintain the highest standards of care for species in our care. We conserve wild species through ex situ conservation, Canada's zoo-wide breeding collaborations and animal transport, conservation research and education with in situ conservation, Head Start programs and research contributions. And then we also are environmental leaders within the community. Sustainability is our main focus, and we try to use that as a core value that guides a lot of our actions here at the park. We recently activated the shoreline cleanup in collaboration with Oceanwise Initiative. We do composting, we have bird strike mitigation and mask recycling, and we recently introduced during Zoo Lights this year a Christmas light recycling program, which is something that we're excited about because we did have good participation. So the first thing I want to talk about here is maintaining the highest standards of care for animals under our care. Of course, we are an accredited facility, and we're actually 3 times accredited facility. So we're Canadian Zoos accredited Zoos and Aquariums member. We are accredited by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums based out of the United States. And then we are also a World Association of Zoos and Aquariums accredited as well. So that gives us a fair bit of reach when it comes to the standards and the participations that we're able to provide. We, as institutions collectively, we put $25 million spent on research. We have almost 1,300 research projects that have been reported, 170 peer reviews and papers that have been submitted, and we have 485 species and subspecies studied within that time frame. And 60% of the research projects have been led by AZA member facilities, which we're a participant of. our main shtick, obviously, people recognize us for our polar bear care, and we, in conjunctions with Polar Bear International and the municipality of Churchill, have 9 polar bears under our care. We do a tremendous amount of research associated with it, and you can see actually that there's a nice leisurely picture of one of our polar bears. That's Storm, just relaxing. They are quite buoyant. 40% of their body is fat. They have hollow hair, and so they float quite nicely. Actually, diving deep is something that is really hard for them to do, especially because their rear end is quite buoyant. They kind of buoy up every time they swim down. We regularly have pool parties on top of our tunnel. You can actually see the walk-through tunnel there that the polar bears are standing on, and so people have the opportunity to see them from down below. This action shot here of 5 polar bears swimming in 12-degree water is taken by one of the animal care professionals that care for the polar bears. And of course, we rescue polar bears that have been a part of a human altercation or in nuisance bear situations. So Storm, our polar bear, has been an absolutely wonderful patriarch for the group that we have. We have 8 bears that are together in a group and 1 that's kept singly, Star. She is not necessarily, she's more of the introvert of the group, and so she's been offered her own independent space. Whereas in the other group actually intermingle together on a regular basis. And the reason why that's a success and possible is because they're fat and happy bears. We go through satiation processes as a management part of our care. And that means that we feed them. If we see any overt behavioral aggression, we give them more food. And because hangry bears don't get along, but full bears are definitely something that they don't, that need has been taken away, and so they just spend the good portion of their day with play. Polar bears are absolutely wonderful ambassadors for the Arctic biome. It's great because people look at them, they're apex predators, which are really awesome. They can smell you 2 kilometers away. They can pounce through 2.5 feet of compacted ice and snow to get to a seal den, and they can run about 40 kilometers an hour. So I would not suggest getting out on the Arctic tundra and trying to outrun a polar bear. They can't climb trees, but there are no trees. So moving on, we have rescue harbor seals. We have 7 of them on site. And periodically through my slides, you're going to see some behind the scenes action shots of a show that we have that's been aired on CBC Gem, which is Arctic Vets. So this is actually, you can see the camera in there with our animal care supervisor, Jackie, doing a little bit of a training session with those 2 seals. All of our seals are rescues from the Vancouver Aquarium Marine Mammal Center. And most of them were deemed, well, all of them were deemed unreleasable back into the wild due to chemical or physical ailments that mostly affected their eyes. And so a lot of our seals here, if you come and visit them, you'll see that they either are missing an eye, have squinty eyes, or have cataracts on their eyes. They're perfectly capable of functioning within a static environment. So that's where aquariums and whatnot are very great for them, because they're able to familiarize themselves with the space and then not bump into walls or anything like that. But they are, again, managed through a satiation program, and they're quite engaging for the public. Seals and polar bears are both shared viewing in the Journey to Churchill site with underwater viewing. And so they're really engaging, and it's really great to be able to educate people in that way, because their habitats are quite large and complex. So when having those large aquariums, we have the Canadian Association of Underwater Science actually certifies us to be able to dive. That connects us with universities and scientific communities across Canada. And actually this year, we're going to be hosting the annual general meeting. So all of those institutions will be coming to Winnipeg, hopefully, barring any pandemic considerations. And we'll be welcoming that community in to enjoy our aquariums. So here's me when the Jets were in the playoffs, a little picture of the Jets. I am the dive safety officer here at the zoo, and we have a team of 1 to 2 divers that dive on any dive occasion. We dive every Tuesday and Thursday throughout the year, even in the winter. We only cut off at -35 plus a wind chill. So the majority of the time we are diving on those days, regardless of the weather. The filtration is temperature controlled, albeit the elements are exposing the person that's at the surface, because each diver is connected to a rope for safety, and that surface safety attendant is what makes sure that that person in the water is safe. The minimum requirement is to be O2 certified and first aid certified, and then a rescue certified diver. So in the case of our diving program, you can see a window here where a diver is interacting with a polar bear. That particular window is what we call SEAL TV. On the side that the diver is the seal pool. And we do dive with the seals. So all of the seals will interact with us and play. Sometimes we'll catch a seal. I'm one of the divers, so we'll catch a seal hanging over top of our heads, peering into our goggles, which is quite the experience. They also pull at that line, and so they can be quite pesky at times, although it's fun. I do like to say, our health and safety person doesn't like this joke, but we dive with the seals, but we don't dive with the bears. We used to dive with the bears, but the turnover rate of divers was just way too high. We do conduct dive safety drills every year, and we do them multiple times a year because diving is one of the most dangerous things that we do on site because of all of the elements, and also because, especially in the seal situation, we are diving with large 300-pound animals that are playful like dogs. We also perform water quality and visibility is maintained as a result of our diving program. And we actually have a multi-million-dollar filtration system behind the scenes that is tens of millions of dollars worth of equipment that actually has the capacity to be able to do all of the drinking water and sewage water for the municipality of Brandon. That's how large it is. So along with standards, one of the main things that we do in a progressive zoo is positive reinforcement training. What that means is there's a participant in the program that is the trainer, which is the human animal care professional. And we have the other participant in that training program, which is an animal. And in all instances, positive reinforcement training involves us asking the animal to do the behavior and then reinforcing them with a payout, like an item of food or attention or something that they hold as value. As we develop that process, we actually develop the animal to be able to go longer periods with more behavior and actually still do that behavior when requested. So again, for credibility's sake, that is me there with long hair at this point with bear spray on, doing a little bit of a training session with Storm, our polar bear, doing a target. When asking them to do these behaviors, we're able to see whether they're willing to do the behavior, how engaged they are, whether they're physically unfit in some capacity. So if they have an injury, they'll actually tell us that by their activity, which would be outside of the norm. We also have, we've trained them for mental and physical stimulation purposes, but also to ensure the voluntary participation in vet procedures, as you might see in Arctic vets. And animal husbandry. So that means when an animal like a polar bear, for instance, is, we have to service the exhibit, we ask that animal, we call it by name, it goes off of display, and then we lock it out so that it's no longer able to be in that habitat so that we can service it. So that is an active part of positive reinforcement training. We also have active participation training I just have a radio that I need to turn off. There we go. I'm here at work here, and there's some veterinarians calling. Anyway, we also have enrichment programs here at the zoo, and that's really important for the stimulus of the mind and the mental acuity of our animals under our care. Seals are really easy enrichment animals because basically anything that you put in the exhibit, they interact with. So you can see the myriad of toys in the pictures. We have on regular occasions, irregular outings. So in this instance, we have one of our animal care professionals in this picture walking Penelope the pig through our polar bear tunnels in the visitor side. And this is when we were closed during the pandemic. And we had the opportunity to provide some entertainment for both animals and I would say the animal care professional too, because some of our animals actually really, especially things like animals like the polar bears and seals, they missed the interaction with people when they didn't have the opportunity to interact with them, because it is something that they can choose to engage in or not. They have enough space to be able to move away if they choose to, but they often engage in interacting with people because it's just interesting. It breaks up the norm. So modern zoos are regularly engaged in enriching the lives of animals to stimulate natural behaviors and inspire play. And in the case of the gibbons, you can see the picture of that gibbon is just all tuckered out, giving his neck a scratch from doing all the swinging that and singing. Swinging and singing is what gibbons do always. So that's Samson just taking a break. So along with that, we talked about polar bears. There's dangerous animals on site, and we're in the middle of a municipality. So we actually have an active firearms team here on site. That's one of the things that I coordinate here at the zoo. And this is what the team members may look like. That I apologize for the picture. Those gentlemen were there during Movember, so that's why the picture has those mustaches like that. But they are basically the best trained team to never ever have to use our skills on site. With all the dangerous animals on site in a busy park, we have a robust emergency response team. We hold range sessions over the course of the year and have internal testing and qualifications that are performed on a regular basis. And everybody that's on the team has to basically be a part of every training process that we have here offered in Manitoba. So the hunter's education course, the restricted and non-restricted possessions and acquisition license, shotgun basics with Manitoba Conservation, and we do Skeet 101 at the Winnipeg Trap and Skeet range as well. So here in the pictures are a little small, but on the left-hand side is a range session with skeet. Those are really fast-moving targets that we have to follow, track, and then shoot with a shotgun. And then on the picture on the right, we have a picture of Manitoba Conservation going through a qualification session with our staff. That ensures that we have an outside body that goes through the qualification with us that also does a similar like activity and has a training program that we're able to adhere to. We actually also went through training, and we do this annually with a group of our team, where we go through tactical training called Into Bear Country with Dave Brown. Dave Brown is a local celebrity gun trainer, and he did the training actually for the first John Wick movie with Keanu Reeves. So that's one of his claims to fame. He also does police officer training. But again, the goal is to have the best trained team to never ever have to use our skills in a real life setting. So I'm going to stop there because we stopped there last time. Does anybody have any questions for me now in the standards category?
Hey, there we go.
I do.
I do.
Yeah. When is the best time to see the polar bears in the overhead tunnel? Time of day?
So I would say I'll give you the best of a number of scenarios. So first of all, shoulder seasons are the best seasons. So spring, fall, best seasons for all animal activity. When you have a cold night or a cool night, not super cold, but a cool night and a moderately warm day, that is the best activity for our tropical animals and our Arctic species and everything in between. In the first thing in the morning is probably the best time to come, and getting there early on, because the bears are looking for the animal care professionals. And so they'll be doing it. They actually offer up behaviors in order to try to seek reinforcement or food. And so they'll be standing up, looking around, giving their paws and all the rest of it to try to get the zookeeper's attention. And so that's something that I would say would be the best time. The worst time is when it's above 30 degrees Celsius in the middle of summer. And that's when a good portion of people are looking for them, because they believe the pools are cold. They're 12 degrees Celsius at all times. But in the middle of summer, the best thing for a polar bear to do is to hunker down in the shade and sleep. And so that's why in the summertime, often they're not seen swimming. I will use the analogy of when I am outside shoveling, even if it's minus 40 out, or minus 20 out, I still sweat underneath that parka while I'm shoveling snow. And I've been doing a lot of that recently. When a polar bear swims, even when it's 12 degrees Celsius in the water, they still get hot in that temperature. And so during the summer, early morning, because it's been a little cooler, is probably the best time, and then the shoulder seasons.
We had another question there.
Yes, I do. I'm a volunteer at the zoo, and
Hey, congratulations.
it's great. I've been doing it since last year. So, but it's really great. I have a question too about the bears. The bears are my favorite. How can you tell the 9 bears apart?
So sometimes it's hard. The people that are working day to day with them. So when I was working there as the lead polar bear keeper, we had 4 bears at that time, and they have facial structures that are completely different. So Casca we'll affectionately call her our sausage bear. She's our largest in terms of, she's quite rotund. So she's easy to tell because she's much larger than the rest of them. Storm actually has kind of a bridge on his nose that is very different. And previous to now, he was the largest bear, so he was easy to differentiate. What we do now, and you'll see it in, again, Arctic Vets, but in a couple of pictures later on, for our researchers specifically, they'll actually do black markings and different markings as well. And and we'll also do certain other techniques, which I'll get into later, that help us differentiate their fecal matter. But essentially, you just have to, their behavior is a part of it. We do have one bear, Aurora, who likes to roll in the mud. Once upon a time in our first year, we were accused by members of the public having black bears in our polar bear exhibit, but it was just a muddy polar bear. So I would say that their behavior is a main component that we differentiate. They also habitually go into different spots. We train them in their holding areas to go into designated locations. So each one has their own name. And we also station train them through positive reinforcement with shapes. So they get a shape and a color assigned to each one that they're able to go to. And so the zookeepers are able to bring that out, and then they're reinforced when the right bear goes to that shape. So there's a lot of different techniques, but usually it's time and observation that gets you to be able to see the differences. Once you recognize it, though, it's really easy to differentiate. Probably the biggest difficulty for a person like myself that's somewhat removed now from that space is that the younger bears are easy to differentiate, and then they start growing and getting bigger and more like size to the bigger ones. And so it starts to become a little harder to tell.
Okay. Is Star, are you ever going to be able to observe Star? I mean, Star is sort of in her own little area and all closed in. Will they ever be able to open that up again?
So the reason why it has been closed thus far is because it is a one-way traffic area, and it didn't adhere to the public health guidelines associated with a one-way pathway, because you had to double back on that area. So once we're no longer mandated to have a one-way pathway, it will likely be opened. But because she hasn't been exposed to people for so long, it will be a transitional period. It will probably start at an hour that she's given access to, or people are given access, and then it will expand from there rather than just 10 hours in one go.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to know, can all the animals acquire COVID?
I mean, it's hard to say. So this particular strain of COVID, no, not all animals. Our cat species and our primate species are ones that are most susceptible to COVID, and we have PPE and protocols associated with that for our staff to adhere to. We are all mandated when working with animals, but as an APC employee, to be fully vaccinated for our own health and also the animals' health. There is other animals that have been indicated that that COVID-19 has been found in. So deer species, specifically white-tailed deer. There's been scientific papers coming out of New York State that have indicated that a large population, up to 1/3 of the population of deer in New York State, had COVID-19 in their system. So, but they were asymptomatic mostly. So, you know, they're minks. We know mink species out of Norway. There was a large contingent of them that had to be euthanized in the fur industry due to COVID exposure. So there are definitely susceptible species. And then there are some that have not exhibited any signs. And so likely this strain doesn't affect them. But some of that is to be determined as variants and all the rest of it are exposed. It's hard to say which ones haven't been, that may be in the future as well.
Okay. Well, that was a good break. Okay, Mark, Mark, you want to continue on, Mark?
Sure. So one of our next mandates is conserving wild species. So ex situ conservation and is one of the big things that we talk about with that. So ex situ conservation is the technique of conservation of all levels of biological diversity outside of their natural habitat. Through different techniques like zoos. So we are an ex situ conservation organization, and we participate in international species survival plans, and taxonomic advisory groups help monitor and instruct our proceedings. So what that means is that we basically don't make all of the decisions as an organization ourselves. It's recognized that as a standard, having the experts in fields that are specialized make the most sense to use as resources to be able to instruct how we go forward. And it also responsibly helps us manage our collection. So as a result of that, we have a Muir tiger breeding program here, and in North America and in the world, there is a consideration in and around what a breeding program for tigers looks like. It's dictated by the Species Survival Program and the experts that are experts in the animal care and well-being and data tracking of tigers internationally. And in our case, we recently were deemed as a facility that would be a holding facility, not a breeding facility at this moment in time. And we have bred tigers here before. And in our 10-year plan, we will be planning on developing more structures supporting tiger breeding in the future. But our male tigers, our Muir tigers, are really well suited to live in Winnipeg. They are perfectly adapted to be able to live in both summer and winter here in Manitoba. And so that's resulted in previous successes in breeding. Recently, we actually swapped tigers with Calgary Zoo because Calgary was decided to be the zoo that would be supporting breeding in the Canadian zoos contingent. And we currently have a pair, a male and a female, and they're actually siblings. So they definitely will not be participants in breeding in this particular holding situation. But Yuri and Yuri was the one that we swapped with Samka. So Samka was the first one to move out. He moved to Calgary Zoo. At 2 o'clock in the morning. That's a flight with a zookeeper in tow. So we fly one of our zookeepers out, or animal care professionals. And in that large crate in the picture above, you can see a team of people that it requires to be able to get a sedated tiger into a crate. And then we ship it over to the airport. Cargo Jet is the company that takes care of large animal transports. I personally have transported Humphrey, the polar bear, from Toronto Zoo. He's back at Toronto Zoo now. And at that time, he was young enough, bred in captivity, that he had to receive a bottle going up and coming down because it helped with his ear popping in the airport transport. We also have our participants in the a snow leopard breeding program, and this is actually one of our most successful programs. Over the last 20 years, we have produced a large number of snow leopards using our snow leopards and offspring from our snow leopards at facilities within Canada and otherwise. We recently shipped out Batu, Bodhi, and Kai, the three in the picture here, to Greater Vancouver Zoo. Bodhi and Kai are not going to be participants in a breeding program, and nor is Batu, because she was so successful. She was able to extend her bloodlines to a point where she is retired from the breeding program. And so they were sent to Greater Vancouver Zoo to be their forever home, basically. We have a breeding pair here currently in Arca and Kita, and they're displayed here at the zoo. And every year, once a year, we have Snow Leopard Day here at the zoo. And all of our money is donated to the Snow Leopard Trust that we receive from that day. And it goes to rebuilding the habitat and the natural environment for snow leopards. One of the things about snow leopards and tigers, for that matter, is responsible breeding and understanding of the genetics is done by this international body of professionals that are specialized in these animals. But it is preserving the genetic composition of this species so that if at the event that we are able to participate in release programs, we have a robust and responsible breeding program attached to it, so that animals that we're sending out into the wild eventually are not unhealthy or unfit to do so. And in a lot of situations, what we're waiting for is either government or institutional commitment from a government to preserve habitat and protect these animals from potential poaching. At one point in time recently, the numbers for snow leopards was 100 animals in the wild. And that is not enough to have a viable species in the wild, but also it was recognized that the habitat was shrinking, and also the poaching, because the low number of animals also resulted in the high value in pelts. And so it is a consideration that we do have to have as we're preparing a breeding program. Red Pandas is also a very successful program that we've been able to participate in, and our annual day of Red Panda Day also contributes to the Red Panda Network. We have bred countless teddy bears in the form of red pandas over the course of the years here at this facility. We currently have 8 red pandas on site with 3 breeding pairs and some offspring from that. And we've connected with Japanese zoos. We actually have a red panda named Sachi that has a fan club in Japan of over 5,000 people. The president of that fan club, I actually toured around the zoo once upon a time, quite a few years ago now, to visit our facility. And red pandas, I mean, as an ambassador, they do so well in zoos, but they are a specialized animal because of their bamboo requirements. And so they are a species at risk. And so we are very proud to be a participant in both their habitat rehabilitation through the Red Panda Network, but also being very successful. We, over the last 50 years, have always been in the top 10 of successful breeding of this particular species. And so it is one of our hats to hang on. Demoiselle cranes are another breeding program that we are a participant in, and have a number of species that land within the top genetic components in the species survival program. We have 2 pairs and we have 3 bachelors, all in all 7 cranes. And we're in the process of, we actually had some sit on eggs this season. They weren't fully viable. So we're going to try again this year. But these are cranes that have the capability of flying over the Himalayan mountains. So they're pretty spectacular. Cranes as a group, all of their species have been traveling the same migration paths for millions of years. So they are pretty much dinosaurs in a lot of ways, which is pretty cool. And we're in the process right now of actually establishing a Canada-wide breeding program. So the 7 cranes that we have on site are all genetically unrelated and all genetically founders. So what that means is they are very valuable. And when we have offspring coming from our 2 pairs, we will be sending one of the 3 bachelors to a facility, another zoo in Canada, and establishing another pair there as we start to grow the program in Canada. We recently had 2 baby Marquar. You can see Cliff and Ivy are their names. They're 2 babies that we brought in a male after 3 years of paperwork and proceedings to bring Summit, the male, over. And we do expect to have up to 6 baby Marquar again this season. Marquar have not been, their habitat has been at a loss, and they have not been very successful in the wild as of recently, because as you can see in their name, they are from Afghanistan predominantly. And coming from a war-torn country, most species are collateral damage, and most habitat is collateral damage of those war situations. And we have always had success. We're in the process of resetting that program, and we are leaders in that Canadian breeding program. Our gibbon family, we have Manju and Samson, Marc and Salju. Again, we're very successful over the years with gibbons. We have a family, so that means that we have a teenager and a young one right now. And Salju, who's pictured at the top, is quite feisty going through her teenage phase right now. If you come and visit her here at the zoo, you might see her bop her little brother on the head, or pull at his arms and play like a marionette, or steal his food, or steal food from mom. And then you'll see Samson, the ever attentive dad, chasing her away and having kicking fights with them. You know, it's quite entertaining. That is a natural part of the process as they establish their family kinship, and eventually what will happen is both Salju and Marc will go to the US and be part of other future breeding programs, but they do have to stay with mom and dad for about 6 to 8 years before they're able to go on their own. So there is quite some time. We will probably see in the next couple years another baby, because we have been recommended to have them breed once again. We have red kangaroos on site as well, and we just brought in a male. He actually landed on December 22nd, so all the way from Brevard Zoo in Florida. And during the Australian bushfire emergency, we actually raised as an organization and as a community $35,000 for that emergency wildlife campaign. Dobby, inspired by Harry Potter, is our new male. And if you didn't know, they get about 6 feet tall, the males. The males are the ones that are red in color. The females are gray. And we jokingly call them bodybuilders, because they actually have arms like Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's impressive how strong those males get once they're full males. So again, I'll pause for a second if anybody has any questions about any of those components.
This has been pretty exciting.
I'd like to know, do we have any wild boars, or do we want to have any?
That's funny you asked that. We're actually in the process of applying for permits to represent wild boars, because there is a major, and it's a great segue, educational value to explaining the situation in Canada of wild boar.
Mm-hmm.
They are an invasive species though, and so there is a number of significant hoops to jump through in order to be able to have them on site and care for them. That's both from provincial permitting, federal permitting, and municipal permitting. And then quite a few modifications to never ever let them escape, because obviously that's how they got into Canada and the US. And one particular family of wild boar can average about $10,000 worth of crop damage per year. There was one estimate, so you can find Wild Boar Canada has really good information on this particular subject. But there was one estimation that there was more wild boar in the province of Saskatchewan than there was people in Saskatchewan.
Wow.
And so because there wasn't a lot of apex predators that were capable of taking out and hunting a 900-pound male boar, or the large aggressive females, even hunters for that matter with firearms can have a quite nerve-wracking experience if they come across wild boar, because they are quite dangerous.
Hello.
You know, we talk a lot about keeping animals in their habitat. Do we have other animals like squirrels and rabbits going to the zoos partitions?
You know, it's funny you ask, because we build a sanctuary for the wildlife at the same time that we're building a habitat for other animals. So we regularly have, I would estimate between 13 was the exact number we counted one year, to 20 red fox per year. We have a number of conservation sites here where we do bird boxes. We have Chimney Swift Tower here in the park that we have brought back, an endangered species that we have here at the park. And all different types of animals, whether it be ground squirrels or raccoons, skunks, etc. Deer, white-tailed deer live in the park. We don't allow the white-tailed deer in the zoo because of potential disease transfer, but the amount of birds and smaller rodents, etc., are quite large. We even have minks and lesser weasels that live in the zoo that help keep our ground squirrel populations at bay.
Okay.
Do you use
Any other
drones?
questions?
Yeah. Do you use drones at all for assessing or any of the care?
So we do, but it has to be very situational, and we have to get permission because we're on a flight path for the airport.
Oh.
So we have to actually get expirable permit and inform the airport when we're using them. And then we do use them for research purposes and otherwise. But again, only for those limited times. We also have 46 cameras on site at Journey to Churchill, which record all interactions and record them onto a survey. A server, I should say. So there is a lot of that type of data that's stored that we use for trail cams as well, and GoPros. Okay, I'm gonna move on to the conservation research and education component. So in situ conservation is the other form of conservation that scientific facilities like our zoo participate in, and that's a conservation of ecosystems and natural habitats and the maintenance and recovery of viable populations of species in those natural surroundings. So on site here, we have a number of different programs. We have an entire conservation and research team that supports those programs. We have a sustainability coordinator also on site that is a participant in those programs as well. One of the main things that starts with it is a conservation plan, the supportive resources of a department. And then when we talk the talk, we need to walk the walk. So we have on the ground active participation and our hands in a lot of Manitoba research projects and conservation projects. Myself personally, I'm on the Animal Care Committee for the Department of Fisheries and Oceans for all Western and Eastern Canada fish research, as well as whale research. And so we go through an ethical component of that process. Our conservation team also has a research and ethics committee on it that makes sure that any research that is being done on site is ethical in nature. We don't do invasive research, and even in some instances, we try to now change the wording to better describe what research is, because when I say research, often people people think of laboratory work or animals that are being researched on for some particular purpose that is maybe invasive or not desirable for the animals. But what we call it more often than not is animal science. And so it's learning about the animals mostly through observation, passive components, and then non-invasive components. Our Dr. Stefan there has 2 hands of glitter there. We have a number of members of the team in those pictures. We participate in the species survival programs and database stud books. So we have sustainable messaging across the zoo and park and signage related components, a sustainability committee, and we do a bunch of different items like polar bear research, beluga research, Pau chic butterfly programs, and burrowing owl programs, to name a few. So recently we actually were cited in a number of papers, but our conservation had some successes this year. They go up to Churchill every year to do beluga bits research, which basically involves taking pictures and then taking samples of the blowhole excrement or water that comes out. And they do a number of different studies with that water, but it also includes things like hormones associated with stress. So we can better understand how the belugas feel about people being present in their estuaries, how boats and other interactions are experienced by them. We also register the markings on the animals, and in this year, 5 years later, we were able to determine a returnee to the observational program. So the polar bear research that we do a number of different types of things. The burr concept was inspired by 3M, the company, and it involves a burr, not unlike a burdock, a thistle, that goes on top of the fur and then is able to stay on there to be able to transmit. And they were doing those testing components on a sedated bear that was going through some dental work, actually. And that sedated bear is then followed in the next picture, where he has 2 black markings, as I mentioned before. That helps our researchers determine which bear it is. Basically, the test in this case was testing how long that burr stayed on, so that it was able to determine a sample size of data for tracking where the polar bear went. So that prototype is called Burr on Fur tag, and it's attached to the polar bears. We also do, and we had international media all the way to Australia reporting on this, glitter poo. So glitter poo is something that we do with our animals to detect hormones. We use all of those cameras that are storing the data and do comparisons so that we can understand what is going on with the animals when they have levels of dopamine or serotonin inside their fecal matter. But we also can use that to determine health-related components as well. When a female is in estrus, et cetera, we're able to determine that through their fecal matter. And what the glitter does is it passes through, is non-digestible, and doesn't hurt the animal in any way, shape, or form, but ends up back in that poop so that we can say, this is this animal. And each bear has its own color associated to it. So we always know whose poo is which. And then the animal care professionals actually collect all of that poo, and we store it in a freezer. And every time we get a conservation intern, we get them to work on some poo, is basically what it is. That's their how they get in on the fun. We also do things like the behavioral markers, as mentioned in the picture, but also thermal recognition. So in one instance, we actually had a person come in, and again, not unlike the glitter, they had a product that passed through the body of the polar bear in the form of a pill, and it was able to determine the thermal process and the digestive rate of the polar bear. We also have cameras that were able to check And I'll tell you, those thermal cameras are very interesting. Watching the footage, you're able to see every fluid transfer through the body of a polar bear. We also have a POW sheep program, which is very exciting here and one of our great successes at the park. At one point in time, there was only 17 of these in Manitoba. Habitat was at a loss. And in conjunction with farmers and people in southern Manitoba, Nature Conservancy Canada and Assiniboine Park Zoo, we are now going to be bringing those numbers up. We've had 47 released into the wild this past year. And this year we're slated to release 170 POW sheeps into the wild as they go through their hibernation stage in a freezer here at the facility. So this is taking a species that we talked about, genetic diversity of animals that are more complex, like tigers and snow leopards. In the case of invertebrates like a butterfly, it's not as necessary to be concerned about the low numbers becoming larger numbers because their genetic variability is not very wide. Their gene pool is quite refined. And so this animal has, with support of humans in the form of our research team, has been met with quite a bit of success. Our burrowing owl program actually started in 2010 is another one that we have been met with somewhat success. We have a number of breeding pairs that are established in human-made nest boxes that are protected from predators. All of the offspring are brought back here to the zoo, and we ensure that they have they're not human oriented birds, so we don't put them on a site here where they're regularly interacting with people in a way that would domesticate them in any way, shape, or form. But what instead we do is ensure that they receive all of the appropriate nutrition required to make sure that they are successful upon release in the spring. And that allows them to get a good head start in the survival of the species in Manitoba, because they are a species that's known as formerly extirpated from Manitoba. So that doesn't mean extinct as a species, but just didn't exist here anymore. Because at one point in time, the habitat was as low as 2.5% of its original prairie habitat. And so that means all the bugs, all the infrastructure was missing. And they weren't able to succeed, but we're now in the process of recovering it. The other component of all of that is researching and inspiring our community. And so again, another picture of a polar bear here during an interview with Dr. Chris, who's just in an office next to me here, who is participating in filming of Arctic vets. We also have an education plan for inspiring people that come to the zoo. A person that might interact with a bear in this capacity, like in this picture, is going to leave with some pretty memorable experiences if they're able to experience something like that. But I say if because we give the bears a lot of choice. They get choice and control to be in any habitat or any space. They get air conditioning all summer long, and they have access to holding and choice. And so an interaction that happens in this situation is one by choice. And that's really important for our animals. Outreach programs is another way, interactive experiences. Summer camps is something that I experienced as a child. I went to zoo camp here, and it inspired me to work here at the zoo. When I was 12, I got to do a lot of fun things. And I even was able to feed snakes with mice. Back then, it was a little different than it was now. And we were able, as 12-year-olds, able to kill the mice ourselves in order to feed them to the snakes. And with bare hands, we use gloves for those types of things now, really understanding salmonella and all the rest of it a lot more than we did back then. I got to work with the tigers as a returnee 12-year-old zoo camp kid, where with raw meats, I was able to jam a bunch of vitamins and medication in and mash it all together and then shift a polar bear using rope, which again, we have so many more infrastructure related things that are much safer than that. And unfortunately for zoo kids experiencing summer camp, it is less of that hands-on experience, because I think when I was of the age to be able to participate in zoo camp, there was less of that safety component considered. Maybe I don't know. There was a zookeeper there for sure, and I'll leave you with the story of also being able to play hockey in the commissary, at the zoo commissary, where we prepare all of our food, and we play very Canadian. We played hockey in a freezer in the middle of summer, with a chick as our puck and horse legs as our hockey sticks, to be able to experience the full commissary experience. So
I don't think they had social media around back then.
no, we certainly didn't. So we're all better for that, I think. And of course, Arctic Vets is something that we're doing to be able to bring out the message of what we do in a, I'll admit, a dramatized fashion. It is TV after all, so take that for what it is. And after the pandemic, I will also say that one of our proudest things that we do is allowing underprivileged kids to be able to come in and experience the Wildest Dreams experience, which I definitely look forward to going forward. Again, I'll pause for a couple of questions if anybody has any, and then I'll move on to environmental leaders and sustainability.
Okay. I'd like to know, do you have any information on the butterfly house, or does the Assiniboine Conservancy handle that? What's happening with that?
So do you mean the one inside the zoo or the one in the
No,
Canadian University Gardens?
Yeah, and the one outdoors.
Okay, so yeah, so this upcoming year we'll have the Shirley Richardson Butterfly Garden will continue to have exotic butterflies in it, where you'll get to experience them fluttering around in the outside display. We will also be preparing a year-round butterfly garden inside the Leaf, which will be our new conservatory that will hopefully open this fall.
Okay.
Yeah, so that will be exotics as well. We don't do well, one year we did when exotics were not available due to the pandemic, but we traditionally don't do local species because we're not able to release those local species due to potential viral components that they can carry in a captive bred situation. And we don't want to transfer that into the wild populace. And so that doesn't happen with the exotic species. And when we purchase the exotic species for the zoo and park, all of that money goes back to Costa Rica, where they come from, to help support the people that take care of those breeding programs. But also helps maintain the conservation of the habitat in that space. So it's a really good contribution in Costa Rica, which is a very eco-friendly country as is, but supports that whole program.
You know, I know you guys keep an inventory of all the animals. Who keeps the inventory of all the butterflies? That's got to be a tough job.
That is a tough job, and we actually have to go chasing them if they ever escape. We have mirrors on everybody and volunteers at each spot to make sure that nobody's carrying a butterfly out with them too. And there has been some instances where a squirrel has chewed a hole in our mesh, and we've had to go chasing blue morpho butterflies across Charleswood. So it's definitely something that we take seriously, because we don't want any released. They would never survive our winter, so it's not a concern in that regard. But you know, we have to be pretty responsible with it. So
Any other questions?
Yeah. Okay, I'll move on to our sustainability component. So sustainability is something that is an underlying component of everything that we participate in. And some significant components are the shoreline cleanup and bird strike mitigation, but there's other components as well. So this year we reactivated or activated the shoreline cleanup with OceanWise, the Great Canadian Shoreline Cleanup. And I can proudly say, along with Pride Winnipeg, I was one of the coordinators for this program. And our sustainability coordinator was my partner in crime with that. We were able to pull out over 1,000 pounds of garbage from the Assiniboine River. And we took advantage of the fact that there was a historic low in water levels And we were able to reach a lot of things that otherwise we wouldn't be able to. We pulled a truck frame out of the river. We pulled a Triumph motorcycle engine out of the river. And a number of different interesting things that we're in the process of assessing with the Heritage Society, because we did look at a focus on potential Indigenous components that might be found in the process, but also this was a historical, there was a historical train bridge as well as a boat launch. And we actually did find train ties and horseshoes and a number of other interesting things. So it was a great success, and diverting any garbage from the river is a success in any way. But we are looking, I am in conversation with city councilors to potentially make this a civic day of action so that more community members can get involved in it as well outside of the Assiniboine Park. We also have components in each and every one of our kitchens, in every one of our offices. We have worms, and normally you don't openly advertise that you have worms, but we have worms, and we're very excited about it because it takes all of our compost, and we're able to make sure that some of that impact is diverted from the landfills. We also have a BioVator compost site and a big compost on site to be able to divert all of those things once they're processed. We can also say that every single one of our windows here at the park has bird mitigation. So in the middle picture, we have Maurice, a volunteer, and he is putting on bird strike dots. That is preventing dots. It has a UV scope, and birds can see it and prevent them from hitting the glass. We also have a bird strike study that our conservation and research program does to make sure that we are tracking any potential bird strikes so we can correct any areas that might be a pinch point for migrating birds. And one of the things that you can do during migration, and I know your plants, especially in the spring and fall, if you have any plants, like that sun, but closing or doing bird mitigation yourself can prevent a lot of bird loss. We have lost billions of birds in North America due to window strikes, especially because of the large skyscrapers that have tons of clean windows that the birds don't see. The other thing that we have here is mask recycling, and that's something that during the pandemic became something that was very important. We have one in each one of our buildings and one at the exit here at the zoo. And Renata, our sustainability coordinator, actually inspired this through Tetracycle. And this allows us to be able to take those single-use items and make sure that they're being diverted or converted from the landfills. Boo at the Zoo has been something that we brought back after many year hiatus, and it was a great success. But along with that, I want you to keep in mind the acronym for Boo at the Zoo, which is BATS, because for Boo at the Zoo, we actually contribute to the North American Society for Bat Research. And the North American Society for Bat Research helps us understand bats and prevent the vilification of those animals, because we have a lot of people that are phobic of bats, you know, whether it be vampires that have made your decision for you, a fictitious creature that that really does them a disservice during Halloween, or even the COVID pandemic for that matter. Bats were considered as a potential source. That is not necessarily scientifically verified, but bats are absolutely essential for pollination of a lot of different crops. But basically, as local Winnipeggers or Manitobans, if you don't like mosquitoes, you like bats, because bats eat a lot of mosquitoes. And so bats need a lot more help than we provide for them. And so we can provide them a little bit through that. And actually, in 2023, the North American Society for Bat Research is having their conference here in Winnipeg. So another thing that we added, and again, from a sustainability lens, we're looking at what we can do to ensure that messaging or programs are attached to our successes. This Zoo Lights is a great success. All of the lights are LED, so the actual impact of power usage is quite low, even though we have over 5 million lights. But conservation's efforts are also attached to create, and it's just about to end if it hasn't already, I think it just ended, the Christmas light recycling program. It's continuing for staff, but that's a process of being able to offset some of the environmental impacts of Christmas lights by using any ones that are destroyed during the process of zoo lights go through this program, but also any members of the public or staff can provide their sets of lights that are no longer being used, and they can be repurposed and recycled. We also, with everything that we do, but it's again happens through zoo lights, we go through the recycling guide, certified sustainable seafood, and ocean-wise stamped seafood components. Certified sustainable palm oil is another thing that we consider when we use products here at the park. So whether it be at the Qualico Family Center, the pavilion, or any food-related component that's happening within the zoo or park, we are looking at it so that we can make sure that our environmental impact is audited in some way by a sustainability committee or otherwise, so that we can hold as much integrity as possible, whether it be compostable cutlery to compostable straws, just to be able to make sure that our impact follows the guideline as best as possible of the saying, leaving only footprints when we visit, right? So with that, I'll ask any further questions, and I'll stop sharing my screen now. Thank you very much for listening.
Well, I'd like to know if you see a wild fox going down the river or walking through your yard, or you see the crows attacking owl nests in your yard. I mean, it's just heartbreaking. Should we do more than run in the house and save ourselves?
But don't chase it, that's for sure.
Is
Yeah.
anybody interested in these hungry looking skinny red foxes walking around, or no?
So I would say that leaving wildlife alone is probably the hardest thing for humans to do,
terrible.
but is probably one of the most important things to do.
Oh, okay.
And nature is very harsh. You know, we have a perspective of nature as being some Disney-like, you know, hopping through the forest with music going along with it. But even in Bambi, there's some pretty traumatic death if you watch that movie. And it's something that fox may be going through a lot more things than you think, where there would be a parasite load or lack of food or otherwise. But they were here first. And they're equipped to be able to survive the elements. And if they don't, helping an animal that may not survive may also not help the species as a whole, because that animal may not be meant to survive for that species. Mm-hmm. From a crow's attacking a nest, I would attribute that if every time you went to your fridge, somebody started attacking you for getting food out of it, I would say that would be pretty annoying, and you wouldn't want that to happen. Those crows are as deserving of food, even though for the little birds that are maybe the victims of that process, those little birds will have more eggs, and those crows will have a dinner. My favorite discussion is with my next door neighbor. She's absolutely wonderful. Her name's Valerie, and she feeds birds in the front and the back, and I benefit from it. But I also benefit from watching the Cooper's hawks come and eat her birds. And she absolutely hates those Cooper hawks with a passion, because they eat the birds that she feeds. And I keep telling her that the bird feeder is a bird feeder that many times over when you're feeding the birds that are eating the birds. Think of all of that. I don't think that feeding birds is an impact. I think that birds can definitely be supported by that. I'll tell you, every fence post that's in my backyard, I have a big garden. I love gardening. And every fence post has bee homes on it for bumblebees. They're really easy to get. You can buy them or make them 2x4 with a little overhang with 3/8 inch drilled holes. I have bumblebee larvae every year on every fence post in my yard. Those are some of the things that you can actively do. Birdhouses, they're perfectly fine to be able to establish habitat, because we're losing more habitat than we're gaining by providing a birdhouse. But you provide a birdhouse and the swallows come in, the finches, or sorry, the juncos come in or whatever. The sparrows kick them out, kick their babies out, make a nest, and another bird group comes in, kicks them out. That's just nature, and letting it be and observing it and appreciating is probably the best thing to do.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question about the little dots on the window. What are they called, and where does somebody get them?
So I could probably reach out and send a link to Martin, and if Martin or Rod could distribute it, I don't have it on hand, but I'll get it for you. They're called bird strike mitigation. And you can research it as well. We started actually by taking a piece of wood and having Sharpie markers and drawing black lines on the outside of our windows while we didn't have them, because that was the quickest method to be able to prevent bird strikes. And the marker actually disappears over time due to sunlight exposure. So that's a way of quickly doing it. But there is, like, those are actually purchased items. So we can definitely send you a link to that information.
Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead, Jerry.
Hi. I just wanted to say I started watching Arctic Vets, so now I binged on it for about the last 3 weeks and got caught up. I think it was really amazing to me to really, I mean, I go to the zoo a lot. I always buy zoo memberships for my grandkids and stuff like that. But, you know, seeing it just as an observer is so different than seeing all the complexities of what goes on and behind. I don't think I really appreciated how complex it really was. And your talk certainly reinforced that. I think the other thing that totally amazed me in it was the cost of maintaining something as spectacular as our zoo. And I'm kind of curious about where does all your funding come, besides us paying our memberships, where does all your funding come from?
So we're still operating on city land. We have an operating agreement. I actually started as a city employee when I first started here at the zoo, and then we transitioned to a not-for-profit. And as we developed, we actually scaled back the operational money that came from the city, but predominantly the city still operates. They operate every building that was formerly a city building and still provide money for repairs and those types of processes. And we are given a certain operational budget from the city of Winnipeg to be able to continue to operate because it is on city land. Gate is a huge driver though. So the amount of people that come through, whether it be through zoo lights, Boo at the Zoo, or regular zoo admission, it contributes to the overall operation, and any money that comes in as revenue becomes next year's capital, which isn't spent. So any project that can happen in that way is actually predominantly driven through zoo admission gate. The other component for larger components like the diversity gardens, that's large ticket items, or Journey to Churchill, which were large ticket items, that comes through a process of federal money, whether it be through stimulus grants or otherwise. Our conservation department is almost entirely funded by grants through scientific communities and international scientific communities. There's only 3 staff that aren't covered by grants, and there is 8 staff that work in that department. And so we go through a lot of that process, and yeah, federal, provincial, and municipal funding. And then as something like Journey to Churchill, for instance, it was $118 million to build Journey to Churchill, and $56 million of that money went or came from private donation. So there's a large amount of money. The amount of money that you get from the province, city, and federal government is often contingent on how much initial money you can get from the private sector. So it actually can be matched, or it can be grow the amount of money that you receive in grants if there's private sector money that comes in. So donations is a huge component, and that's why the zoo switched to being a not-for-profit, so that was a possibility.
Okay.
Any other questions? Debbie, any questions, Debbie? Well, I can go ahead, Debbie.
Hi. Yeah.
Hello.
No, I found your talk fascinating, really interesting, and to see all the different aspects of it. So, and I too really enjoy the zoo. So thank you so much for sharing all that information.
Yeah, you're welcome. I try to avoid as much as possible the Arctic vets component, because that's already telling you a lot to do with what the veterinary department is doing. Obviously episode 2 is coming out right away, so that will be interesting. Episode 1 had our polar bear surgery, and that was actually very recent for us, so it's fun. You might see me in it if you look again. I'm in shorts. I'm the only one in shorts. And I was like, oh no, because we're supposed to be portraying Arctic vets. And I try to wear shorts as long as possible. I'm one of those that I'll wear shorts until it's really cold. I'm an Icelander, so it's something that's in my blood. And I'm like, oh no, I should have been wearing a parka and pants or something, but there I am in shorts.
Well, Mark, I have to say you are a very entertaining presenter. And I think some of the monotony that came up, you really made it educational, and you made it very presentable to us. You put it in layman terms, as we like to say. So on behalf of the participants, we got to give you a big round of applause.
Thank you very much, Mark.
And,
Thank you.
We will have to bring you back again. Make sure to share this episode, this session with your friends. We have other South Winnipeg Senior Resource Council Zoom sessions coming up. Mark, what's our next Zoom session?
Our next one is a virtual tour of the Museum of Man and Nature on the 25th of January,
Okay.
followed by the Library Outreach Department on the 8th and 10th of February.
Okay. And once again, to everyone out there, have a wonderful weekend. We look forward to seeing you again. And Mark, once again, thank you very much. And you know what? I'm glad you're my friend too. I really feel excited about having you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much
Everyone
for
be
inviting me.
safe. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.